All right, hello everyone, Handmade Beauty Box subscribers, hi, thanks so much for joining me, and Periscope watchers, thanks so much for joining me on this month's Handmade Beauty Box Live edition. Today, I'm going to show you how to make these adorable Mermaid Ombre soaps. This is a melt and pour project, and this was January's Handmade Beauty Box project. So if you're a subscriber, thanks for being a subscriber. I'm super happy about that. If you're not a subscriber, stay tuned for the end, and I have a coupon coming up just for you. If you are a subscriber and you just joined and you're like, oh, but I really want that January box, you can buy a single at handmadebeautybox.com. Today, I'm going to be going over the basics of melt and pour soap, and also talking about colorants and showing you how to layer some soap. And of course, I got a little wild and crazy, so I have some extra projects to show you as well. If you're watching on Periscope, feel free to just ask questions because I'd love to answer them live. And if you're watching on StreamSun because you're a Handmade Beauty Box subscriber, also feel free to ask those questions because that's what I'm here to do, make soap with you. Your Handmade Beauty Box this month came with a lot of stuff. In fact, it was so much that you're going to be able to make 2 full projects with all of your ingredients, so you have extra left over. You got 2 pounds of Stevenson brand Vanilla Stable Melt and Pour soap. What does Vanilla Stable mean? Well, vanilla fragrances often discolor soap, and this particular soap has vanilla color stabilizer added, so you can use vanilla discoloring fragrances in your soap and not have them go brown. Pretty cool, right? You also got 1 ounce of relaxing fragrance oil. And the relaxing fragrance oil is a really kind of adult take on a vanilla fragrance. And so it's got some absolutely spectacular notes like lavender and cedarwood in it, and isn't just a straight vanilla. You also received hydrated chrome green colorant block, 0.3 ounces of cosmetic grade iridescent glitter, an aluminum bottle with a spray top, and there's rubbing alcohol in here because that's a good finishing touch for our project. And then finally, you received instructions that taught you everything about making this Mermaid Ombre soap, and on the back, tons and tons and tons of tips for how to layer. Then finally, your Handmade Beauty Box for January also included these adorable labels, and I love the way they look on the soap. Just a really great finishing touch, right? Any questions before I get started, team? I'm going to get started, but before we do that, let's go ahead and just talk about the things you need from home that didn't come in your box. So for example, you're going to need a medium heat-safe container, something that can go in the microwave. I like to use glass for this project, spoons for mixing, a non-serrated knife for cutting the soap. This is really important for later on when you're actually cutting your soap, your finished soap. Measuring spoons, and paper towels, plastic wrap for wrapping your soap, and then rubbing alcohol. And it's totally optional, but for layering, I often will like to use like a candy thermometer or something to check my temperatures. So to get started, let's go ahead, and I'm just going to get my workstation really organized here. And to get started, cut your soap base in half. And because remember, this Handmade Beauty Box this month came with enough soap to make 2 complete projects. So you have plenty of soap. So cut your soap in half, so you're only making half of the soap. This is 16 ounces of soap. And then cut it into smaller chunks. The smaller chunks help allow your soap to melt down evenly and effortlessly in the microwave. This is pretty important because you don't want to accidentally scorch your soap by melting it too long. I love how this Vanilla Stable soap from Stevenson cuts. It cuts so beautifully, and it is like totally perfectly clear. I just love that. In fact, I'm really curious. Can we read through it? Oh yeah, we can totally read through that. Love this. So go ahead and take your soap and you're gonna put it in the microwave and you're gonna melt it on 30-second bursts. And the reason we're doing 30-second bursts and not any longer is because, again, I don't want to scorch this soap. If we do it much longer, we really do run the risk of scorching the soap. And what happens when you scorch the soap? You know, nothing like terribly bad happens, but, well, it kind of smells bad and it burns. So I'm gonna go to my microwave over here and just do 30-second bursts. And while I'm doing that, let's give a little talk about this glitter. So this is a cosmetic grade glitter. It is not a craft store glitter that you would find for rubber stamping. I think that's a really common misnomer, is that many people assume that just because it looks the same that it is the same, and it's not. You want to make sure that whenever you're using or substituting products, when you're making melt and pour soap, that you're using cosmetic grade products or products that are soap safe. So for example, a lot of people like to use clays in their soap, which is a great idea, but you can't use pottery clays or anything like that. You want to make sure that you're using fully sterilized products, because this really is a product that's going on your body, and we want it to be as pure as possible. So Courtney, have any questions come in? Oh, I saw the hand raise. Okay.
Can you talk a little bit more about a discoloring fragrance oil and what that means?
Oh, I can absolutely talk a little bit more about a discoloring fragrance oil. So for example, this is the relaxing fragrance oil, and it has almost a 9.5% vanillin or vanilla content. So you know how vanilla is, just gonna pull this out and interrupt that question. So here we have our soap base, and this has been at a minute, and you can see it's melting, but it definitely is probably gonna need some more time. I'm gonna keep doing the 30-second burst because it's very important to not burn our soap. So you know how vanilla, back to our question, is brown? Well, that means that anything that has vanilla fragrance in it naturally is going to be a more brown color in the final product. So just because you can't see any brown in here doesn't mean there's no vanillin in there. And so that vanilla or vanillin will discolor the soap brown. Courtney, do you have a photo of a discolored soap? Oh, that's awesome. Okay, go ahead and pop that up for people that are on the stream send. And then if you are watching on Periscope right now and you're like, you know what, I don't know what brown looks like, just know that this soap, if I use the relaxing fragrance oil with a just not a normal melt and pour soap, will actually go a full brown color. So that's why it's so important that we're using a vanilla stable melt and pour soap. And then I see that we have a question on Periscope right now, Haley.
Yeah, do you have to use lye to make this soap?
Do you have to use lye to make this soap? So melt and pour base is a pre-made base that, let's see, do you want to see this really quick? So that we're at 1.5 minutes now, so you can see how we're melted. We're going to need another minute at least. So melt and pour soap is a pre-made soap base. And so what that means is that the lye part has already fully been taken care of for you. So at some point in this process, back at the factory, someone added oils and lye and water to make it, but you don't have to. So what that means also is that this is safe for kids to use. I do this with my 2- and 4-year-old all the time, and it's completely ready to use right now as is. There's no cure time, there's no drying time, there's nothing like that. So you definitely can use melt and pour soap right away. Another really fun thing about melt and pour soap is there are a lot of different types of melt and pour soap. So for example, you can get a shea butter soap, you could get a goat's milk soap, you can get a hemp soap, you can get a soap that suspends additives really easily. So there's a lot of different options for your soap making. So for example, if you're really interested in making more melt and pour soap because you just got the crafting and soap making bug, you can go to brambleberry.com, and there's about 15 different melt and pour bases there. So melt and pour is a really easy and fun way to get started with soap making. And in fact, when I was 16 years old, that's what I used to get started with my soap making. I went out and I bought melt and pour soap, and that's what got me into soap making. So I'm a huge fan of melt and pour soap. So right now, I just pulled the soap out, and I think we're at about 2.5 minutes for that soap. And I'm gonna just give it a stir, because there is a little bit of solid chunks in there, you can see, but I can also see that this is steaming. So I know with just a little bit of stirring right now, that this is going to naturally and easily melt down. I'm gonna toss this one piece that I didn't get in there earlier in there as well. And the reason I'm doing that is because the entire thing will melt down so much faster when this soap on the outside is hot, and the energy it takes the melted soap to melt these solid chunks will help cool my entire thing. And why is the cooling important? Well, because we're getting ready to do a layering project. And so in order to do that second layer that I'm already in my head kind of thinking about, that first layer is going to have to harden. Now, if you got your box this month, you saw that there was a bunch of tips on layering in your instructions. So we're gonna go ahead and get started with our layering. First things first, this project has all of the layers have glitter. So Periscope, everything's got glitter. Streams, our live handmade beauty box, everything's got glitter. So our very first step is to add 1.5 teaspoons of glitter. And again, this is glitter. This is a 1/2 teaspoon size, so I'm going to do 3 of these. And this glitter is a fine iridescent glitter, and it adds just the perfect amount of sparkle and shimmer. Did you have a question, Courtney?
Do you have to add the glitter?
Do you have to add the glitter? Absolutely not. You do not have to add the glitter for this project to work. So if you are not a fan of glitter, definitely leave it out. I'm personally a big fan of glitter, very possibly because my parents didn't let me play with enough like My Pretty Ponies as a child. So I love having glitter in everything. So now we've got our iridescent glitter in. And then we're going to add 10 to 15 milliliters of the relaxing fragrance oil. I just had a direct message on Twitter today from someone who said, I need to know what kind of usage rates for essential oils I should be doing. And they wanted to do a full tablespoon per pound of melt and pour soap. And that is way too much. Basic usage rates for melt and pour soap are 0.25 ounces all the way up to 1/2 ounce of fragrance or essential oil per pound of soap. But really 0.25 ounces definitely will do it. So here we're at 10 to 15 milliliters of relaxing fragrance, and it really smells so good. I remember creating this fragrance almost, 12 to 15 years ago with one of our first brambleberry.com website designers, Christine Selleck. So I have a really fond place in my heart for that fragrance. And now you want to make sure you're stirring really, really, really well, because you want that relaxing fragrance oil to be fully mixed in. Next, we're going to split this into 2 containers. Before we do that, I'm just going to cut a little bit of my hydrated chrome green colorant and just do some small pieces because I want to have a lot of colorant options. And the smaller the pieces are, the better they'll melt in the soap.
Let's do that. Should we do the layered ombre first?
Yeah, that sounds great. Absolutely. Okay, so we're gonna start with our layered ombre soap, and we're gonna pour just a very thin layer into the soap mold and spray with alcohol to eliminate bubbles. So, thin layer. And for those of you watching on Periscope, it's a tiny, tiny thin layer that's it's like literally just a tiny little bit, like about that much. And then once we've poured our thin layer into the soap mold, we're spraying to eliminate the bubbles. And this is rubbing alcohol, and what it does is it helps break up the bubbles on the top and helps disperse them. And so you can really get creative. You can make thinner or thicker layers. You can do like 4 layers or even up to 8 layers. But you're definitely going to want to let this cool just for a few minutes until it's hard enough to support that next layer of soap. And while that's cooling, go ahead and add a sliver of the teal colorant to the remaining soap and mix. And we're just going with a sliver. because remember this is an ombre color. And Courtney, did you have your hand up? Do you have a question?
What kind of rubbing alcohol? 70%? 90%?
Oh, what kind of rubbing alcohol? So this is 70% rubbing alcohol, and you don't need the really fine grade, the 99% rubbing alcohol for melt and pour soap, because really all you're looking for is for those bubbles to break the surface tension. But that's a great question. And you can get rubbing alcohol really at any kind of grocery store or any sort of, you often will find it in pharmacies, that type of thing. And it just works to break up any bubbles that are on the very surface of the soap. And with layering, it's kind of important to make sure you are starting with a smooth surface. So you notice that just that tiny little sliver of that hydrated chrome green colorant has made a nice difference here. So I'm just gonna look at my layer, and we're not quite there yet. Like if I put my finger in there, which I'm not going to because I don't want to break up my beautiful layer, it wouldn't hold. Like you can see that the soap is still kind of moving. So we're just gonna keep waiting for it to harden up, which probably will take maybe another minute. Yes, Courtney?
Does the glitter act as an exfoliant when it's in the soap?
Does this glitter act as an exfoliant in the soap? You know, this is such a fine grade glitter that I don't think you're going to feel it at all. I've personally never felt it. It washes down the drain really nicely, and I don't ever even see it on my skin really when I use soap that has this beautiful fine iridescent glitter in it. I love the sparkle it gives though. Yes, there's a question coming in from Periscope.
Yeah, is the higher percentage alcohol better for cold process soap?
Is the higher percentage alcohol better for cold process soap? So the higher percentage alcohol is better for cold process soap. And cold process soap is when you take your lye water and your oils and your fats and you mix them together. And then there's a 4 to 6 week curing time. There's some safety considerations. So if you're interested in learning about cold process soap, this is my brand new book, and it lists out everything that you need to know about making cold processed soap. But when you're making cold processed soap, that higher percentage alcohol is really important to use because that helps to prevent soda ash. With melt and pour soap, you can use a lower percentage. So we're just about ready here on this first layer. Probably have another 30 seconds, because the reason for that is I know that the soap is pretty hot. Still, I can feel it. It's at 148 degrees, and that is pretty warm. That's gonna melt that first layer of soap, and I don't want to melt it because that is a great look. And we'll probably do another couple of projects just to show you guys some other fun things you can do with this month's Handmade Beauty Box. But melting my first layer, not something I want to do right now. So I'm just waiting a little bit to make sure that my soap is hard. And while that's happening, I'm going to go ahead and cut my next pound of soap so I can get ready for the next project. Again, when you're cutting your melt and pour soap, you just want it to be in smaller chunks so that it melts down more easily and more evenly in the microwave. You can also melt your soap down in a double boiler if you don't have a microwave, or in a crock pot that has a low setting. You'll notice that if you ever melt your soap down in a crock pot, you often can easily scorch your soap if you don't stir it. So make sure if you ever end up using a crock pot that you do definitely use that lower temperature setting. And if you're going to use a double boiler, the reason you want to always use a double boiler is because it gives a nice, even, diffuse heat as opposed to something that is really kind of concentrated in one spot. I'm gonna go ahead and just check my layer here. We're getting a little bit better. I probably have enough time to cut the rest of the soap before that layer. And so you can melt your soap in the microwave, in a double boiler, or in a crock pot. And when you're doing it in the double boiler, don't ever leave it unattended, of course, because anything on a stove, you don't want to leave unattended for safety reasons. And if it's in the crock pot, just make sure you're really looking for it, like looking at it pretty routinely and stirring it. Yes, question?
A lot of questions today.
Oh, good.
So how do you know when to pour the soap if you don't have a thermometer?
How do you know when to pour the soap if you don't have a thermometer? What I'm doing is I'm literally just poking this, and kind of now it's really kind of gloppy, and I can see that it's not moving. So I know that this first layer is going to support that second layer. So I'm going to go ahead, spray with alcohol, because that alcohol helps the two layers adhere, and pour a thin second layer. And once it's poured, then I'm just going to go ahead and spray with alcohol to get rid of any bubbles. And then at home, and I'm not going to force you guys to sit through every single layer hardening on camera. That seems a little bit like watching paint dry, but at home, the next step would just be to add another sliver of teal colorant to the remaining soap and stir that in and let it melt. And what you might find at home is that this ends up kind of melting a little bit, hardening a little bit, melting a little bit. And so what you want to do is when this is sitting, when you're waiting for this layer to harden, you can cover this with saran wrap, and that will help that skin to not form on the top of the soap. Or you can also remelt this on short bursts, so like 10 to 15 second bursts if it starts to get hard in the microwave before this next layer is ready to pour. So with that, is there any more questions on this layered soap? So I went ahead and made some of these soaps ahead of time for you guys, and I want to show you what they look like. So I'm going to kind of clean up my area, move the spoon out of the soap. One of the least favorite things I've ever done is leave a spoon all the way in a melted container of soap, and then the soap got hard and that spoon did not want to come out. So I removed my spoon from that soap, got these little guys out of the way. I'm going to put the rest of my 16 ounces of soap just into a container to store it. And then I'm going to show you guys some really fun ombre soaps that I made. So this is an 8 layers ombre, and I love these silicone molds because they really just come out so easily. And I can see, there we go. Okay, perfect. So let's see, how does this look? It looks perfect. The ombre is just fantastic, and this is a full 8 layers, so that's why it's just this beautiful kind of iridescent, glittering ombre look on the way up. So this makes about 4 bars. This is where the non-serrated is so important. If you have a serrated knife, what ends up happening is you'll see serrations all the way down, and that's no good. So this is our ombre soap, and you can clearly see some distinct layers in here, and I think it looks fantastic. I also did another design variation that I want to show you with just 4 layers for the ombre soap. So pull gently away at the sides of the mold, gently away at the sides, and then push down with your thumbs to easily and gently release the soap. I love these silicone molds because they just, you can really kind of get the soap out pretty easily. So in this case, this one has less layers, but you can't really see from the side, but I bet we're going to be able to see once we cut in. So again, non-serrated knife. And here's our 4 layers. And yeah, I mean, I definitely can see that there's a definite difference between the 4 and the 8 layers. I think they both look great. And if you're a beginner melt and pour soap maker, you might consider starting with just the 4 layers as opposed to the 8 layers. Just kind of depends on your patience levels for sure. So are there any other questions before I move on? Okay. So I really want to show you guys some other ideas for what you can do with your second pound of soap. So yes, you can totally make the same project again. There is enough soap in there for you to do it. Or I thought it might be really fun to show you guys how to do kind of some double pours. So this is a double pour soap, and it's really easy to make, and it's really fun to make. So the first thing that you're going to do, we've already cut our soap into cubes. So we're going to just melt this in the microwave. And Amanda, can you take that soap and melt it in another microwave? I don't want to make everybody have to wait through 2 minutes of melting in a microwave for doing any more recipes. So there's a variety of ways that you can scent and fragrance your soap. And when you're thinking about making your soap for the first time, a couple things you want to take into account are, do you love all natural products? And if you love all natural products, you're going to want to scent your melt and pour soap with essential oils. Essential oils are plant-based aroma chemicals. Yes, they're a chemical, even though they're all natural, that are either steam distilled or pressed out of the peels of plants. There's a couple other ways to get essential oils, but those are the most common ways. And essential oils are considered all natural. You get them from the peels, again, the peels of like oranges or limes, or you get them from flowers and herbs. Really popular essential oils are things like cedarwood, sandalwood, lavender, litsea, lemongrass, and those are all natural essential oils. Yes, Courtney, there was a question?
Is the colorant natural?
Is this colorant natural? So the colorant that came with your kit, the hydrated chrome green colorant, is a pigment, or also referred to as an oxide, and it is considered to be a natural product. Back to fragrancing your soap, and then we can talk a little bit more about colorants, because that's a great question. So back to fragrancing your soap, another option you have for fragrancing your soap is fragrance oils. And it's really important that when you're using fragrance oils for soap, that you're only using skin safe or soap safe fragrance oils. So that means no potpourri fragrance oils, and that also means no candle fragrance oils. You definitely want something that's been approved for use in cosmetics or approved for use in soap, because again, this stuff is going on our skin. It's really important that we're safe and natural with our products. Another thing that people sometimes think is, can I use cologne? Like, you know, like the actual perfume that comes in a spritzer from the store? And the answer to that is yes, but. So you could use cologne, but it's got such a low amount of active fragrance oil in it that it won't really scent your soap very well. So for example, this is 100% pure fragrance oil, 100%. If it was a cologne, it would be 95% alcohol and only 5% fragrance oil. So you'd be putting a really diluted product into your soap. So it's really important that you're using undiluted pure fragrance oils or essential oils when you're making your soap. And I'm just gonna check this, and you know what? It's a little bit, I see a lot of chunks in here still, so I'm just gonna go ahead and give it another 30 seconds. And while I'm doing that, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about colorants. So colorants are something that's really fun. It can totally set your soap apart by having the right colorant. So there's a variety of colorants you can use. First of all, the most common one is food coloring, right? We all use that when we bake and when we cook, and it's food grade. Food coloring is F, D, and C colors, so food, drug, and cosmetic coloring. And it's also really easy to obtain. One of the drawbacks to using food coloring is that oftentimes the food coloring will end up bleeding into your lines. So for example, if you use a red food coloring and you are doing like a really cool embedded project like this third one that I've kind of designed for you guys to do later if we have time, what ends up happening is you end up getting kind of a red halo. And so the red halo ends up not looking great. So food coloring isn't ideal for melt and pour soap unless you're doing one color for melt and pour soap. In this project, we're using a pigment and an oxide. Pigments and oxides are great because they're non-bleeding, meaning they stay color fast. So if you make a line, that line stays. So the green line will stay as opposed to bleeding. They're also considered all natural. So that's a really positive thing, especially if all natural is important to you and you're using essential oils. Courtney, was there a question?
Yeah, well, we have a photo of a bleeding colorant.
Ooh, you have a photo with a bleeding colorant? Yes, why don't you do that while I consider how I'm going to find a second container here. Okay. There we go. So you pulled up a bleeding photo. Thank you so much. So those of you that are watching on StreamSend, you got a bleeding photo. And this project that I'm going to do right here, this is called a double pour. And so I've got my soap melted here. And I'm gonna go ahead and add my relaxing fragrance oil again to this, and there it is. It's about 10 to 15 milliliters of fragrance oil. So since I've already split my two containers, I am going to add it to both. And then it's 1.5 teaspoons of glitter. So I'm gonna add that glitter to both because of course, as we know, a little bit of glitter makes everything better. And then all we need to do is color one container. So I'm gonna go ahead and color this container, and I really want it to be a kind of dark color. So I'm gonna go with a decent amount of color for that. And you'll notice that this Handmade Beauty box, your January Handmade Beauty box, had a lot of extra color, which is fantastic. So you really have a fair amount of things that you can do with your Handmade Beauty box this month. Again, you're gonna be able to make 2 full pounds of soap And there's enough that you definitely have enough to do lots of really great color. And then I'm going to mix this side in. And once I've mixed the fragrance oil fully in and the glitter fully in, I'm going to show you how to do the double pour. The double pour is really easy. It's just coloring your soap from one side with one color and pouring your soap from the other side with another color. And you can double pour from opposite ends of the molds. And a higher temperature makes kind of more subtle swirls, and a lower temperature makes more distinct swirls or distinct lines. And they both lather up great like soap, and so it's just a design preference. So now that I have both of my soaps fully melted and fully ready to go here, I'm gonna put my dirty spoon over here. And so, silicone mold, fragranced soap, colored soap. And all you do is pour evenly from each side, and you can do a pass if you want to, back and forth like that, and that is it. And you notice there's a lot of bubbles on the top of this soap. So I'm going to take my rubbing alcohol, spray the top of the soap for that nice finishing touch, and then let this sit for 4 to 6 hours before trying to release it. So Courtney, is there time to do one more project, or?
Well, did you make that soap yesterday?
The soap.
Do you want to cut it?
Oh yeah, good idea. Yes, let me spray that one more time because I saw a few bubbles going to the surface, and that's kind of one of my pet peeves. I'm gonna put this out of the way. So I did make the double pour yesterday. So this is the double pour done with hot temps. And there we go. And love that glitter. Gonna cut about a 4-ounce bar again. So this is the double pour with hot temperatures. And I can see, I wonder if the alcohol would help me. There we go. I can really see those gorgeous the gorgeous wispy swirls, and Periscope, here's some gorgeous wispy swirls for you to see as well. Do you guys see them? Can you see them on camera? The wispy swirls?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so these are the gorgeous wispy swirls with a slightly higher temperature. And then we're gonna move on, and I'm gonna show you the double pour with the cool temperatures. So, easily popping this soap out of the mold. And with the cool temperatures, you can see that this soap really kind of stayed in its lanes. So this is the kind of thing that you really notice with the cooler temperatures, is the soap kind of just hardens up right away, which is really interesting. So it's a different look. So it really just depends on what you're looking for. So in this case, with the warmer temperatures, you have a lot more of the kind of swirl, and the cooler temperatures, you'll end up seeing that the colorants didn't mix as much. So let me do one more cut on here and to see, kind of to show you the difference. So here we have the warmer temperatures and the cooler temperatures. So that's the double pour. So that's one idea for how you can use that extra pound of soap if you don't want to make layers. And I'm not going to show you this on camera because handmade beauty boxes are really fast to make. This particular project is about a 20-minute project from start to finish. But this is another idea for what you can do with your handmade beauty box this month. You could just cut up some clear soap and just embed it. So literally pour your green soap and then just put in these cut blocks of soap into your green soap and call it good. And I think that's a really interesting look too. So your handmade beauty box this month, you have so many options. You can do your ombre soap, you can make your embedded soap, or you can make your double pour soap. Remember everyone, I really want to see your projects. You guys may have noticed on Instagram that I retweeted one of our Handmade Beauty Box successful posts from one of our customers because she hashtagged it, #HBB Show and Tell. So I was sure to see it, and it was awesome. I love seeing your projects. So please make sure you're posting them on our Facebook page, on Instagram, or tagging us on Twitter. And for those of you that are watching on Periscope and would like to try a handmade beauty box for the first time, here's a coupon for 10% off anything on the website. And the website's handmadebeautybox.com, and you can get this month's project on the website right now, or you can sign up for a monthly do-it-yourself Crafts Box subscription so that every month you're getting something unique and special that's made just for you by us. So you guys, I would love to see your projects. Please tag them HBB Show and Tell on whatever social media channel you're using, and be sure to check out the blog at handmadebeautybox.com to see what we're doing in the future. Until next time, happy crafting!